I'm going to let Christina from Alexander Interactive welcome you all. So thank you, AI, for hosting us.
It's great to see you all back here, and we thank you all for coming. Hope everyone's had some snacks and a glass of wine. Just to let you all know, shameless plug, we are a variety of roles, so please check it out and feel free to apply. And thanks so much.
So Alex?
Yes, thanks everyone for coming. So I'm really excited about this talk. We're just going to discuss the pros and cons of owned communities versus non-owned communities. Let's think about where we're spending our effort building our audiences and how much data we can really own from that. And why don't we start with each of us just introducing ourselves, and then we can just get right into the discussion.
Awesome.
I guess I'll start real quick and then we can go down. So my name is Alex Dow. I'm a senior manager of community development at Vimeo, and I've worked there for 3 years. My claim to fame is that I came up with the word droney. So I think that's going to be my your legacy.
I'm Sarah Judd Welch, CEO and head of community design of Loyal. Loyal is a community development studio, and we work with all kinds of companies from Fortune 50 brands to early stage startups, creative companies and nonprofits to put people at their center through community-driven strategies, campaigns, content, platforms, and products.
I'm Rachel Kaplowitz. I'm the CEO of Honey. We are a technology company. We are a platform for communication, so powering a lot of the communities that are types of communities that we'll talk about today. Mostly we work with companies and power communities internal, so employee communication, but we are working with some more distributed communities that could be brand communities or just communities of like-minded people. I have not created a word like Droney.
Okay, the pressure's on.
I probably created more words that I didn't even know. I'm Nick Cicero, and I'm filling my role as the token gentleman up here. Notice I'm the token guy, it's gentleman because this is ladies' night. So,
We're not providers, you're okay.
it's about respect.
She's not single, unfortunately.
No.
You're on video.
Sorry, baby. Yeah, so my name is Nick Cicero. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Del Mondo. Del Mondo is a media production and analytics suite for creators and brands. So YouTubers, popular Instagrammers, Snapchatters. I'm going to Snapchat all night. Being able to put that together and really helping individual creators and brands come together to put together what we call this created with economy, which is basically community at the center of creating really awesome stuff. I also was the first strategist at Livefire, so really helped grow a lot of the strategic partnerships with brands that used tools like Livefire to put community ideas center, Percolate, Expion. I've had some stops at a few other places as well. And I know a few of the people up here from all of these awesome community groups online as well, so it's like one big love fest up here.
Cool. Hi, I'm Jen Peaty, and I'm the lead community manager at a company called Moderation, which is a British social media agency that handles moderation and community management worldwide for global and luxury brands. I also started something called CMGR Chat, which is a Twitter chat for community managers on Twitter, and a website called thecommunitymanager.com. So, yeah, got some stuff to say. So, Alex.
So let's kick it off with you, Jen. What is community? How would you describe it? How do we define community?
Ouch. Okay, so what is a community? A community, in general, is something that's been around for millions of years, right? It's a group that people feel that they belong to. And this can happen in your local community, like a neighborhood, or it can happen online in something that you're interested in, like a general topic, or it could be branded, and it could be a part of a company's strategy that you're participating in their community with other people that like their product or service.
Very good, you pass.
Woohoo! My students would be proud. I also teach community management at Syracuse University, so I don't know if I can do that.
Do we have any other Syracuse Orange men and women? Actually, Syracuse Orange women, I would say. But do that even count anymore? Because they're like, oh, we're not orange men, because Did you guys know about that? Like Syracuse really stopped calling themselves Orange Men because it was like a weird thing. It's like we don't want to be involved with Indians. And then it's like, do we offend women or do we offend not? It was a big to-do. Did you know that?
It was 2004.
Yeah, 2004. So now we're just a piece of fruit. And try to grow an orange tree in Syracuse and let me know how you make that.
You can grow it, it just won't be orange.
So on that note,
I got nothing.
Hey, Melissa.
what would you say the difference between a social media community and an owned community is?
It's a great question. I mean, straight up, it's ownership. So, obviously, that's the name of the title, so it's like, duh. But no, really, it's a big difference, right? Like the fact of where do you build your land? Like it's like 10 years ago. And almost 10, like a long time ago, I said this thing that I called the sandbox theory. And it's this idea that if you want to be the coolest kid on the street, you want to bring everybody to your sandbox, right? You may go over to Jeff's house, you may go over to Susie's house, and you may bring your Tonka truck, or you may bring your bucket and pail, but that's to show that you have that cool toy, right? Because eventually you want them to come back and play at your house, because who really wants to leave their house, right? Like, I love my backyard, I want to hang out in my backyard, I don't have to walk anywhere, just do what I need. And that's kind of like the way that I look at how we're building communities in purely social environments, in other social spaces versus like what we own. So like at Livefire, a lot of what we did is like put out tools that would encourage people to have most of the discussions in and around the content in a space that they could measure it on, right? I mean, that's the biggest difference for me is Facebook is making billions of dollars, love them to death, but I'm not getting like a fraction of what is actually going on. And there's that question about scales and things. Just preach. This is not like, I'm not putting on a show, I just am usually like this, ask Jen, so it's fun. But yeah, like it's really about what do you own, what do you not own. Any of you guys, any of us here can start a Facebook page, Twitter page, anything like that, and build a community, but quote unquote, that serious air quotes for the hearing impaired or the blind on the X's tape. Air quotes, because what it's about is like, if I want to go and get those people to take action, there's 18 million other things that they're competing with. When I have my own space, when it's my place, they're coming to there for a reason. They're not logging in because they're seeing 18 other things from their friends and their family if they come in to Life4, or they come into the Loyal website, or they come into the e-moderation, or you work with Oprah or whatever, like Oprah's website. They come to that place to consume that content, and if you as a brand are like striving for that, that is at the core of like an owned community, is the place where people want to see my stuff, where they come to me first and not go to other places.
And I mean, with Facebook changing their algorithms every other day.
I don't even want to talk about the Facebook algorithm. If we're gonna like, it's too early yet.
All right, we'll come back to that.
I like you guys.
It's kind of like special interest because you're not coming to get, you're getting slanted information because it's basically to the brand.
You mean on Facebook, you mean?
No, I'm talking about.
No, owning it, yeah. So here's the thing, like there was this weird period of time. It was called like the 90s. I don't know if you guys remember it. I was a young whippersnapper up in there, getting in trouble for going on the internet searches, tying up my parents' phone line. But you know, before Google, like I remember a time, life pre-Google. I was like in middle school. Sorry, I date myself here.
I remember MS-DOS.
Okay. Oh, I remember DOS too. Command D on that, the one dungeon game. Command D. You'd go all the way down and crash your computer, and you'd be screwed. My dad got super mad. Well, I lost my train of thought. What were you saying 1 second ago?
Before Google.
Before Google, there was zero discovery mechanism for the internet, right? You had to know exactly where you wanted to go to. For some reason, all of these awesome discovery things have somehow ruined our sense of self-choice. And that's the reason that I think, like you just said, for like conflict, I think that Facebook kind of muddled all that stuff up for us.
I'd also say too, when you own the platform, it's not necessarily that it's slanted towards your brand. I mean, there's calls to action.
Really?
It's honestly, one of the best examples I can give you is Sephora. They have a community called Beauty Talks, which is just about beauty.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with
Okay.
their platform. So when we talk about owned communities, it's just general subjects.
And so basically, and it's good for Sephora because Sephora can kind of put in
And they put
certain
that little
messages,
shopping
yeah.
cart right next to where you're talking about.
But they can also put certain messages, and they can present you with certain articles
their-
that
Yeah.
if
from their
communities,
moderators,
what they
sure.
develop. That's very important.
To say that there's not
Financial.
sales in branded community is not true. There would be sales, absolutely. But
We're all selling. you're
all
not
the,
selling, you're
yeah.
fucking lying.
Right. But generally, like when you're in those communities, you can talk about other companies because it's a general topic of beauty.
So Rachel, what to add on that? What would you say are the benefits of owned community?
Sure. So you actually know your people. You have their email address. You can be very specific about the messaging that you send to them and when you send it and how they receive it. Like the content that you put out on Facebook, only 2% of it is actually reaching the audience you're trying to reach, which is a pretty horrible feeling after you create a ton of awesome content. So to put it in a branded space that you walk in, you feel like you're part of the brand and you want to be in that conversation, it really sets the tone for a good conversation. And it also creates advocates for your brand, because when was the last time you're like, hey, you should really go join this Facebook group, it's really awesome. Like, they all look the same, they're all like, especially like LinkedIn groups, right? Right? Like the conversation could be good, but there's nothing like to take away from it that's like really inspiring. But if you look at some of these communities out there, not honey communities, but like Random House is a really cool community called Figment. And it's a community space for 13 to 18-year-olds who write and share their writing, and they can comment on it and share it with each other. And then Random House can also slide in some book recommendations and complete the cycle there. But that's a really cool experience that I'm going to want to go and tell someone about, because it's not just a Facebook group. So just creating that advocacy and also direct feedback. Sometimes you can get feedback for sure on Twitter and Facebook, but it's a very different kind. You can go really in depth. And I, personally as a consumer, sort of feel weird leaving feedback on Facebook and Twitter for some of the brands. But if I knew I was in a branded space where I knew that feedback was going to be streamlined and only broadcast to the people that also might share that interest, I'm going to be much more likely to share my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I find even just for Vimeo that people who comment on our posts on Facebook are just a completely different type of person than the people who are commenting on our blog posts or on people's videos, or even in our forums. It's just...
Are people commenting on Facebook and Twitter complaining?
Not always.
Negative.
Yes, sometimes. I mean, there are a lot of support requests that come in through those channels, even if they're not, they're not channels where we say like we provide support here, but you have to help people where they're talking to you. So, but there's positive, because we're posting a lot of staff pics. They might be very cute videos, uplifting, fun videos, so people will comment, tag their friends, that kind of thing. But every once in a while, it's a little bit of like, I don't know if you actually even have a Vimeo account. Like, do you even know what we are? And you maybe just stumbled upon us on Facebook and liked the videos and liked us, but it's a completely different tone from, I think I would say on every different platform, there's a different type of user that comes across. But let's talk about the flip side. What do you think the cons are of having an owned community?
It can definitely be more expensive to build, particularly if you're building a custom platform versus going with a more, like a platform like Honey or Brave New World or Mighty Bell, for example. Those are definitely much more affordable. Though oftentimes when brands go with owned communities, they tend to build from scratch. And that can become incredibly expensive when you don't have great relationships with development agencies and design agencies. However, in contrast to that, sometimes it can be much cheaper in the long run. For example, many platforms that offer SaaS software, community software to big companies like Lockheed Martin, for example, the starting price point for those softwares are $10K a month. And many smaller and mid-sized brands that have direct relationships with agencies, and they could build out a platform for $300K. And when you look at that economics year over year, it's much cheaper to actually build one yourself. But it definitely can be more expensive, and it also requires you to have an ongoing relationship with either an external agency or to hire some staff to maintain and build that in-house.
Yeah, totally. I can put that stamp of approval on that cost, because I worked at 3 SaaS companies just in the past 4 years. And yeah, you're not going to be able to, everybody wants to get a 6-figure yearly deal, no matter who you are. They don't really care. They have other things and they don't think about that kind of stuff. And that's tough. very, there's tons, like I said, Lockheed Martin, cool, like they have tons of money. How much will that get used? I don't know. But then there's a lot of companies that will only.
Actually, great community platforms I've heard.
Oh, okay, cool.
I can play on it myself, but no, not mine.
Okay, cool.
Not mine.
Well, I love Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin, big in Syracuse. They're a huge plant there, and I have a lot of friends that work there. But yeah, like that's the question. They're like somebody like that. They, you have companies. Think about it, like you live in a world where other companies know your needs and problems, right? That's what we do. We sell. We come up with solutions for problems. So knowing the fact that there is an issue that needs to be solved with big companies with big money that can spend bigger dollars on something that potentially could cost the same or less for somebody who's a lot less. And that's why you see different tiers and types of tools. But you got to remember, that's the cost benefit, like you just said. You're building when you work with a third-party platform, and like totally speaking from experience, and I was in the, did the deal with the devil here on the Livefire side. I mean, when you work with a third-party platform, you are beholden to their development cycle, to their release schedule, to their investors, to their media, to everything. And it's good and it's bad. Like, I love startups. I run a startup right now. I've been working on it. I love the idea of it. I think it's exciting. But I also think that there's a lot of bullshit that goes with it. And the unfortunate part is that gets passed down to the customer at the end of the day, not like, a company does something terrible to a company, and be like, oh, they should hear a format, and they probably won't. It's the customer who really loses. So I think that you have to like really take that with a grain of salt, and that's why I love, like, don't be afraid to build something. It sounds daunting. It can be really expensive to do the other way, like when a platform removes that one key feature that like you would bank your entire company on this one feature, but you're like the only person who uses it in the entire scope of that product. So they're gonna remove it and you're screwed. So that's the other crappy part about like working with a third party.
The downside also to building your own platform is sometimes they flop like fabulously.
Yes.
I think social media is something that's like much, I don't want to say it's easier to cultivate because like we all know how hard it can be to build a quality social media following. But some brands either just like don't warrant a true community, social media is just enough for them, or they haven't really put in the thought and work into a real community strategy. And I've seen community platforms launch, and I don't want to point fingers and names, that don't have clear purpose or a well-defined product feature set, or a clear information architecture, and users get on their platform and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing here and I have no reason to come back, and then it's a ghost town and it totally flops. You spend all this money on something that totally failed.
I can speak to that actually. So I started working with a client last March, a very large client, and they changed their website and their community platform. They took away a lot of the interactive pieces, and it went from, this community is millions. There's millions of people in this, and it's actually a very great community, positive. There's a lot of interaction generally. And once they did this, once they changed it, without a strategy, now it's like a ghost town. And so the next 6 weeks of my life is trying to fix what they broke, because they didn't think to ask, like, well, what if we did this? What would happen? It's like, we could easily figure out these incentives or these things that like went wrong, but now it's a lot.
Situation.
It's hard, and it's harder to fix what you broke than to do it right the first time.
Right.
You can't just bring a community back to life. Those people have moved on.
Hard.
It's like not a habit of theirs anymore. And maybe there's still some ill will over what happened. You know, at that point, you're almost recruiting a new community to come in.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the people who were part of the old community are like, it's not the same.
You
as
have so many opportunities to engage people. So like your onboarding process becomes incredibly important. It's super important you have relationships with customer advocates so you can pull in and get you to and get them to help you out, and kind of like seed engagement up front. It's like a very intertwined, huge strategic undertaking, which requires expert execution, and it's something that's going to be pretty hard to pull off. It's not as easy as setting up a social media page.
Yeah.
Can I play off that and posit something and ask a question to everybody?
Yeah.
So, I've been like, maybe this is just because like I'm like neck deep in Jira tickets, building and coding right now. But like lately I've been feeling more and more, and like we've all, like some of the people here, like we've known each other in the community space for like years, a lot of us, and there's been a lot of changes, and like I know Jen and I are both from Syracuse. Literally like a week after Jen started this like first community group, like I was in it. So like for 5 or 6 years we've been talking about some of this stuff ad nauseum. But lately I've been thinking more and more, and maybe just because I've been sitting in tech side or just trying to think, have been adopted this like growth hacker mentality where I look at my community. You know, everything is a product to me these days, and I'm building something that's used, and if people aren't coming back to it, so I almost think of like when I'm building a community structure, or when I'm trying to like talk to somebody about how they're building a community structure, I think about it, how are you launching an app? Like maybe community managers should start to think more about like marketing managers of app companies that have to require user growth for them to actually succeed. Now, I'm not saying that the measure of success of a community is the user growth. We know like metrics, it just proves what you want it to prove. You have to have a real objective. But the fact that regular participation is super important. Think about any app that you use on a regular basis. Why do you like that? Why do you come back to it? Why do you download a particular app that may have one specific function and then you delete it right away? Right? You want to think about and make yourself as sticky as possible. And I think that that's kind of something that I just feel like, what do you guys think about that? I don't know, am I way off? Am I not?
I don't think you're way off.
Okay.
There's definitely like a user experience to what it feels like to engage with the community, and you need to think about what are those elements that make a fantastic user experience of being a part of a community, and translate that either into programs or features or content or something. Like whether it be a product notification that you receive via email or via push notification, or if it's like every Friday we do X.
Community is a product.
Yes,
right? Like
as we talked a lot about this yesterday at the conference. Yeah, you actually went there.
No, I wasn't.
Well, Alex and I, we were at a conference yesterday called CMX Summit, and one of the talks was on how community is product. And so community is something that can be productized in some regards.
But in some other ways, you can't necessarily say like, okay, we're gonna build it, and then like, let's check it in 2 weeks and see where we're at.
Automate everything.
It takes a while to really grow a meaningful community. So
Yes.
definitely having some goals and metrics along the way, and again, those metrics are not gonna paint the whole picture, but just to at least have something that you are looking at that you can see like, okay, this is healthy, it's growing, or we need to change some things because for some reason people aren't coming back, or
Yeah, you bring up a good point too. I think the metrics of an owned community versus the metrics of an unowned community are very different. So an owned community, you could play around with everything, right? You could subscribers, newsletters, traffic, events. I mean, there's a million things you could do with it when you own it because you can manipulate it and play with it. But when it's an unowned community, it's more like marketing and reach-based, impressions, and kind of more flimsy. So I think it just depends on what you're going after and what the product overall means with growth. Like, what does that mean to you in which way is how you determine how you look at owned versus unowned.
Yeah. Like Spotify, think about it. Spotify isn't judged in the marketplace by how many Twitter followers they have. They're judged by how many users that they use on Spotify. And even though the community pretty much lives in social, like they try to cultivate that. They don't do a ton of deep community on the Spotify side. Internally do some cool stuff to partner. But like,
Actually, I learned yesterday that they do.
oh really?
They have
Spotify, I'm sorry. Josh,
they have
don't kill me.
user forums for super users that they invite in, and then they have like even super user groups on which they have people who sign NDAs and they get to test new features and products.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
they're
why
paying
I totally haven't gotten
Yeah,
invited.
yeah.
I've been like a paid Spotify user for like 3 years
Me
now.
too.
What's the deal? They probably know I'm gonna just run my mouth and like talk about it.
Just go complain about it and see what they do.
Would you call Yelp a community?
What?
Yelp
Yes.
a community.
Yeah, totally.
Yelp actually hires community managers in each one of their cities. So I think they have like 300 or something community managers. It's nuts. And they're more of like city managers, event managers, but they manage like the Yelpers of that city.
Yelp Elite.
Big question.
Yelp Elite.
I love the way that the Yelp does things, in my opinion. It's just like every time I'm in a city that does it well, I feel like it's unavoidable. I feel like the cities I've gone to, like San Francisco, I lived in Florida for a lot of years, and I was in Orlando, and Orlando had like some really awesome Yelp stuff. Yeah, like, I don't know, I just feel like good cities that I go to, I see Yelp, personally.
I have a quick question. I know we're talking a lot about metrics. How do you guys maintain a healthy balance of like the integrity and like the change in thought pattern of what your company set out in the beginning to not getting absorbed to always by looking at numbers? Now I know we live in the 21st century and numbers do equate to a lot, but
Yeah.
how do you kind of maintain that healthy balance?
I think it's important at first to understand what your business objectives are. So, if you're Spotify, what is your goal of the company? And then how does that translate into what your community is working on? You will sometimes see brands start communities for the sake of starting a community, and that's not a good reason to start a community. It's good to start a community when it's aligned with what your business is trying to accomplish. So with Spotify starting a community, they're cultivating a community of people who are really enthusiastic about their product, and they're using that community to debug their product features, which helps them to shorten their product development cycle and ensure that every product goes out the door is a really amazing product. And the more amazing their product is, the more people talk about it, the more people share it, the more users download it. It's just like an ongoing cycle. So when you think about your community KPIs, you should really be tying it back to your overall business objectives and see how that backs up.
So on that note, how concerned or beneficial is it then to have a lot of that internal data protected?
Cool. What do you mean by protect?
Well, keep it more within the brand itself or the conversation itself, rather than releasing it or having someone.
It's pretty important. It's very important. At least, so I work for a TV network. One of my clients is a TV network, and so we don't share a lot of it. Even now, I'm not really supposed to say who it is or what it is, but you do. You protect to a point, right? I wouldn't give you exact numbers if I wasn't allowed to, but I can speak about it in general here. Good practices, best practices, things like that. But yeah, you want to obviously keep your stuff to yourself. You don't want to give away trade secrets, right? That's how you become.
But you can still pick up some of those things if you follow the data.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, the data with community, you have to take with a grain of salt to a point, and I people can disagree with me on that. But for example, we were going around and around. I was mentioning, the community has not died, but it's significantly gone down in the past year. So we were trying to figure out KPIs, and one of the reasons for that was I'm an agency, or my company's an agency, and the company was like, all right, we spend a lot of money with you guys. How do we justify what you do? And how do you justify things like moderation or responses or just general conversation? That's not really something that equals viewership or sales or whatever. But what it does is it overall creates a brand awareness of the goals of the brand. So part of the goals of the brand is to be aware and to respond and to take serious matters serious, right? So the fact that there's someone there listening means that people love that brand. And that's what happens over and over. I mean, we deal with things like suicides on a regular basis, but it's because they feel they can come to that community and talk about it. So I think by the end of the conversation, we actually realized we couldn't say X equals Y. And so really it was just more of, okay, this is a brand play for us. It's going to be different for a lot of products and different.
Or you can understand a lot of the conversation is centered more within say with this community on X problems. So there's a lot of concern because of this one. At this age group or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes into I'm straight up geek out for 2 seconds here, but that goes into straight data science if you want to do that. What Jen said, I'm not saying that what Jen said is wrong. I'm saying that if you want to take a lot more time, you can draw a stronger connection.
Yes.
That takes so much time though, and Lockheed Martin has probably got 7,000 people just focusing on that or something like that. You know what I mean? They're probably focusing on all that stuff. So the data can, I wish that I could say something better than the way that Sarah just said it, but no, you have 3 levels. You have your business objective, you have your brand objectives, your business objectives, your campaign objectives. You're building a community to satisfy a business objective, and then you're measuring based on the little actions you take at the campaign level. And eventually, those little things that you do, if you do 8 different little campaigns within your community that's satisfying one objective, whether it's to solve QA problems, or whether that's to inspire power users, or whether you're on Vimeo and inspire power videographers to be posting better stuff, I mean, that satisfies that, and then you break it down to the most essential elements possible. I mean, I'm getting super down in the weeds here. That takes a lot of time to do, you know what I mean? That takes a lot of time and effort, and you got to know that this one thing that you're hoping to try to find from within this giant mass of data, if that's not proving your point, then just get rid of it and just try something else. That's the cool thing is, like I said, data paints the picture that we want it to tell, right? There's a huge difference between metrics and analytics. And analytics is a process. A metric is a number, right? I think that that is like the most important thing that you want to think about is that we can collect metrics on everything, but that doesn't mean that we should. Doesn't mean that it's valuable.
Can I ask a more metaphysical question than
Sure.
data and analytics? Because I read this really interesting article somewhere that everybody thinks that the internet and the world that we live in created communities, but the article argued the opposite, that it created networks and not communities, because real communities are people that get together around a sense of purpose. And actually Yelp, Spotify, what is that sense of purpose? I see none. You know, maybe the Random House thing a little bit. I can't. So the metaphysical question is: can brand really create true communities?
Well, I think there's an important distinction there between a network and a community. As Jen had said in the beginning, like a community is a group of people that have a sense of belonging and identity in with a group of people, and they have a standard way of interacting with each other, and they give to each other without expecting something immediately in return. And a sense of purpose, like that's something very deeply personal that's different from person to person.
And the article was arguing that that is a true community, right?
Yeah.
So could brands ever achieve that? Perhaps
yes,
not.
but,
And so, do you know any good examples?
Yeah. Yelp Elite, like those people actually feel really deep connection to the brand, and they do feel purpose in curating the best restaurants in their city.
But
like
is that
purpose,
a real sense of purpose?
Yes.
Purpose
So,
is
no,
different.
a real sense of purpose could be
Who
deeper
are
than
we
that.
to judge what someone finds purpose in?
That's the thing. So
Right.
look, if we're using the example of Yelp, right? So Yelp is ubiquitous, right? Across the country, at least, or anywhere else. Millions of people use it. But Yelp Elite are maybe, I don't know, 10 people in a city, 15 people in a city max, right? So they get together on a weekly basis and talk about all the things that they've Yelped or whatever. I don't know what they do, but they create a small subset. So what actually ends up happening in network theory is that the network gets to be so big that you start branching off subsets. So it starts another cycle.
Right.
And then you just, yeah, exactly.
Which I read is actually one of the characteristics of communities is that they break apart and they dissolve and they form mini nucleuses.
Yep.
You know, and they're decentralized and they're unruly by nature.
Absolutely. And
You
that's
know, you
actually
cannot control any of it. And so can a brand do all this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so much
Did
fun.
Emily? You guys were at CMX, right? Was Emily Castor there?
No, she was sidecar. I saw her in
Lyft.
a couple years ago.
I'm just gonna say, like, if you want to know a great story, I mean, I wish that she was here to like tell about. I think that she articulates it perfectly. The Lyft story. If you guys haven't had a chance, like, everybody should go and like Google your butt off and find everything you can read about Lyft. Like, Lyft has crushed it, and everything like. That is real purpose, and they really like. She did it.
The community helped build the thing.
Yeah.
You know, and there was the same article on Fast Company about Waze. The community helped build the thing. Now, I would like to hear if any of the communities that you talk about helped build anything, and if there was a true sense of purpose on it.
Well, so there was a talk yesterday at CMX Summit about Duolingo.
Well, and I've seen the talk from the community manager from Duolingo, and I kind of see the sense of purpose there a little bit. Because
Well,
people
but here's the
know
thing,
it,
it's
right?
not up to any of us to judge what someone's sense of purpose is.
Yeah.
I would
Like,
also
that's
tweeting
not our judgment to me.
Phew, because it would be really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Facebook, and generally speaking, to me, I think Facebook is a network because you connect with like every single person on there.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, the same thing. Like, yes, there are Facebook groups that are communities, and there are LinkedIn groups that are communities, but Facebook and LinkedIn themselves are just networks of people. And that's very different than a group of people with a strong sense of identity and purpose. But like, we're not here to judge on what someone's sense of purpose is. Like, there are communities about diapers. There's communities about...
No, but it is. So I would
is.
argue that we're actually talking about one part of a bigger thing. So communities have actual smaller subsets. There's community of purpose, communities of practice, communities of intent, communities of action, right? There's all these types of communities. So they don't always have to have a purpose where their goal is to achieve something. Sometimes they're just transactional, where people come to a place, they need a piece of information, they go away. Car companies are huge. Mini Cooper had a great community of, what would I call it? Community of intent, where they come to buy something, they need a piece of information, and then they go away. But while you're there, you're sharing information with people who are doing like similar. So you don't have someone who's there 365 days a year. You're there someone for maybe a month until they buy a car and go away. Or they come back and they love their car so much because that community helped them that they now provide more information. So communities for brands aren't always about purpose. They're just about what fulfills that a particular need. Grassroots campaigns are huge for this, where you have maybe one event a year, things like that. So you're not there serving a purpose there all year long, like you're just there for the 3 weeks or whatever.
So would you agree it's a true community?
Absolutely, because people make connections. And if you feel that you belong to that community, it is a community. And like there are some things that are, millions of people, it's a network, it's absolutely a network. Twitter is a network, but there's a community somewhere on it for someone. Like I met everyone on this panel through a Twitter chat that I created years ago, right? Many people in this room I met through that thing, and I would very much argue that it has become a community. Is there a purpose outside of just meeting people? No, but it has provided a lot of benefit to me, jobs, friendships.
But we're sharing information too. I mean, it's not, we're not just meeting each other and like shooting shit. We're like, we're answering questions and like prodding each other and learning from each other, so.
Yeah. So I would say that if you feel
Talking behind each other's backs.
all the time. But if you feel that you belong to something and you get something out of it and someone else gets something out of it as well, that's definitely a community. Community could be 3 people or 300 people or 3 million people.
The tough part is really when we throw the brand on it, I think. You know what I mean? Like before I got into this ad marketing tech type world, like I was a musician, so I worked in the music industry for years. And I wrote a ton of music for like television shows you probably all watched. And when I first got into it, I didn't know anything about it. And I found these forums and message boards, and this was almost like 10 years ago now. And today, I can't even count on hands and feet the number of people that I still know from that space 10 years ago. 2 weeks ago, I just hired 3 of them to become like influencers and creators for our company Del Mondo. I've been watching them for 10 years and watching how good they are at creating stuff and watching them grow from being like, this kid was 8 years old when I met him. I was 17. He was 8. He's now 18 years old. I know. He's now 18 years old, and he's like one of the top platinum producers right now. He's produced 9 out of the 10 songs that you probably go and hear on the radio. And nobody knows that, but I do because I've been in touch with him for 10 years, and now he sells all of his stuff, like he's music industry weird type stuff. But like, I'm like, you have a really great value. Let's take that and change that now. And so like, we have a connection, and we just start from just like where we left off. And we've changed platforms. Like now we're all on Twitter. Before it was like a really weird forum. And the brand that kind of put all this together, it was just some fly-by-nighter guys that were like, we want to have a place where music producers can come into a place where they can talk about all these different types of things. Straight up forum, nothing around that. It's the people though that we took that ourselves, and now like we do that and other things. We get together in certain cities and meet with people.
Right, so this is what I mean, like it's the community more about the people rather than the brand,
Yeah, absolutely.
Always.
It's nothing to do with your brand.
The brand's just like the host.
That's the mark of a great community, though. And like, if I go to Barclays community all the time for travel, which is a credit card. I have the credit card. I don't use it because it doesn't really provide me any benefit, points or anything. But I go to their travel community online all the time to get ideas for places to go. So I was just in Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and I actually found like 3 hotels like through them. I didn't use them. I didn't book anything through them. It was just people in the community telling me about stuff they've done. So I go back there all the time. I'm not really providing any value to Barclays, but they're hosting it because someone else probably is. So it gets tough with brands, but if you're a good brand with a great community, the mark is you're not selling to them actively. It's all passive. And one of the benefits, we talked about benefits, was if you have a branded community that has done very well, you're 10 times more likely to buy more of your stuff, like come back, repeat sales, versus just the people you market to, which may do 1 or 2 purchases or something.
Yeah, and sorry, I have one last section. I'm super passionate about this subject because she says it is a community, right? And I say it's our community, it's we, because it's like people that know each other here from like 2007, 2008 from other countries, and are kind of been studying communities and kind of how they behave. So you mentioned not everything warrants a community. So what does warrant a community? Like what kind of brands?
I would think the better question to ask is like, what doesn't warrant a community? There are some brands for which people are not necessarily interested in gathering around them, or like maybe their interactions are lightweight. So for example, there is a VC firm, USV, called Union Square Ventures, that's known for investing specifically in networks and communities. And there is a company in their portfolio called Sip Science, based in San Francisco, that is it's a data company. And what they do is they aggregate a bunch of financial transactions, specifically from e-commerce sites, and through the aggregation of that data, and through data science, they're able to better identify instances of fraud, the more companies that are within their network. And no one wants to talk about that kind of stuff. Like executives, it's not sexy, they don't need a community forum, like there's no purpose for them to have their community members talk to each other. But they do have a valuable network that provides value to every single company that uses their service. That's the kind of company that doesn't need a true community, but yes, indeed, like they do derive value from the network.
But they also could have a community of people who are focused on fraud detection in their
It's possible.
in
They
their
could have
company,
like a
right? I mean,
investigative type of community. That's possible. I don't think there'd be like e-commerce managers in there, but you're right. It could potentially happen. It'd probably be pretty small, but
I mean, I think we're always looking to connect with people who are doing the same work that we're doing and sharing best practices. And so, those people who are doing that work, they probably want to know, how are you doing it over at Etsy? Because, at Amazon, this is how we're doing it, and maybe we're not doing it as well as we could.
I guess my point in using that example was that that kind of company does not require having a community, and it doesn't need one because there's already significant value there without one.
If you're a B2C company where you're selling something, where you have a service, more than likely you probably would benefit from a community. If you're B2B or something like Sarah just mentioned, you don't need one. Could it be done well? Absolutely.
Yes.
But if you decide that you want to put the resources into it with the right strategic mind behind it, it could flourish. Will it be unlikely? Sure. But is it possible that it could succeed? Absolutely.
Like Salesforce has a fantastic community.
Yeah, a lot of SaaS companies do. But they're internal for the users. They're not maybe necessarily something you'd sell to the outside world, but people who already are using the product because it's something companies use.
Salesforce's data has shown that the customers who engage in their community spend more money overall over the course of the life cycle of the company. So.
I mean, what's the ethical implications of all this data they're collecting? Because they're collecting data on me, and I don't get paid for this. And they're using my information.
Do you use the product?
If you're using the product, you pay for it.
That's it?
Well, that's what I was.
No, but I mean, I'm using the product, okay? But they have information that I am using the product, and I've already paid for the product. So somebody else is buying the information about me and then selling it to somebody else.
They're not selling it usually.
Yeah,
they're keeping it.
They're collecting
so
data.
Salesforce knows that their customers who use their communities are spending more money with them overall as compared to a customer who doesn't use their community. They don't sell that data to anyone.
No, I meant, okay, but your other example about fraud, and they're collecting all this
but all those customers are opting in. Like that's why they use their
they
product.
are opting in.
Yeah,
they're like sharing.
Think
their
about you. I
information
mean, every
to
time
get
you sign up,
the
every time you click on a new app and you sync your Facebook ID over, you gave up every one of your permissions.
But that's what realize. People don't realize that. No, they do. But there are people.
No, this is a software where its entire premise is that the network and aggregation of that data makes it valuable for everyone.
Well, that was
money hand over fist.
That was the point where I was asking, like, if they're benefiting keeping that like internal and like.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
not to like
that's-
exaggerate.
I would say that's
this data that's the only reason that. So excuse me. That's not the right thing to say. That is, it's 1A and 1B. 1A is provide value that ties to an objective. 1B is collect the fuck out of everything that you can get, because you're never going to get anything. And I don't mean to get like, but I spent a month and a half in March going in with a really, really large financial organization, teaching their entire global marketing teams, 12 different departments, about this. And they talked about the same thing. Like, oh, what about our data? Oh, no, you don't. You do this because this is what you have. And if you want to grow your business, this is what you do. You build this community so I know those things. Like Sarah said, you want to know that 72% of people who came into your site made a purchase then on your website. Yeah. Some of this is like basic Google Analytics 101 that we use in our marketing, right? Like we measure conversion. You come in through Facebook, you buy something on my cart, you come in through this Facebook, you sign up on my thing to download a white paper, now I put you in this category that says I'm tracking every little bit of activity that you do tied to this particular white paper, because then that's proving this ROI here. It's the same thing like at a much higher level. Like that is, in my opinion, the single biggest piece of information that you don't get from social networks. That's own or not own. Yeah, you own, and that's like what Livefire, obviously I'm doing Livefire now, but like that's what we built this entire company on, was this premise of you as a brand operating in the social space, as Jay Bear would say, are an interloper. You give up everything. You've given everything to Facebook. Publishers are doing the same thing now. It's a totally different thing. You're giving up. You're distributing your brand, and you're putting your brand at the center as opposed to your space. If you put your space at the center, you're collecting your data. It's a value exchange, and you have to decide what's the cost benefit for everybody. I would say that 9 times out of 10, if I have the option and I have the scale, I'm building my own community. I'm getting way more info. I'm syncing it up to my own systems, whether it's CRM or whether it's passing it over to like a crazy database that I got a data scientist digging and mining on all their activities, but knowing that they came in this certain thing. Like, I don't have any of that access to do any of that stuff. And I can't tell you any time that somebody clicked on every individual link if I post 3 links in a Facebook post, but I can tell you every time somebody clicked on it, if I posted that in a comment feed. With owning my community, I could know that stuff. And that's the biggest thing, right?
Well, especially if you look at like suicide prevention, for example. Like, we would like to think that everybody would use this data responsibly, right? But someone could take, for example, why someone is taking or pulling, and associating like what causes are, most prevalent in what age group. But that could be misused. That's data that could be misused. Yeah. So protecting like information.
Absolutely, and there's a ton of laws in place too. So for like a lot of communities that are under 13 years old, right? Like we represent like Nintendo is a big thing, right? So tons of kids, or the Harry Potter world stuff, Pottermore. I mean, all that is young children who quite often bully, suicide, self-harm. I mean, those things are huge. And there's actual laws in the U.S. and the U.K. that dictate what you do with that data, or what data you're allowed to pull. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, whether you own it or don't. But there's pre-moderation, post-moderation. There's a lot of stuff that goes into how you can function on those platforms.
Well, yeah, it's like straight up, it's how do you communicate that, and what do you actually do with it, right? I mean, Tinder, or not Tinder, OkCupid, great example. You know what I mean? Like, all these sites, you give up your rights to use the data. Like, how can I give you a better experience if I'm not measuring what you're doing? If you're never using, look, I'm on Meerkat right now. I'm on Meerkat right now. Everybody say hi to Meerkat. Hey! If Meerkat didn't collect data, they couldn't know that Twitter is the most important thing for the Meerkat universe right now, that everybody who logs in should connect with their social graph on Twitter. If they weren't collecting data, they'd have no idea that that was like a thing. How would they, be able to improve their product too?
And also beyond that, users love knowing information about themselves. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes you will see communities share, you will see the hosts of the communities, the brands share data about the users within their community, being like, oh, so 60% of you say X, or 6% of you say Y, and that's really interesting data for them, and it's something that can be highly engaging. Yeah. And that's like why OkCupid's Trends blog was so popular.
Mm-hmm. Or Spotify, the yearly report they put every year of all the music you listen to. Like, I love that thing.
And Salesforce's marketing report, that one's pretty great too.
But you're right. You have to be smart about it. I'm not saying that. You have to. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but it's like,
No, I understand where you're coming from
Yeah,
too.
cool.
And I
Yeah, they're on the
100%
same
hear
page.
exactly what you're saying, and this information is really, really important. I mean, it has been important throughout the years for all the companies, except now they're grabbing it without people actually knowing it. And once people do know it, they're going to start doing other things to block the information from being able to be aggregated because of how it's being used. I mean,
But that changes over
the
time.
implications are really tremendous here, and I think you're right on the forefront of this stuff. But there's no argument that the companies really need this information and for them to be profitable.
I'm more concerned about the information that the government's collecting from
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
personally. But so, Nick, you're counting right now. You were Snapchatting earlier. What kind
I really
of,
want to do a snap. We'll do another snap in a second.
What kind of data can you collect on those platforms about people you're connecting with?
It's a good question. So very little to none on new platforms. Facebook, by far and large, is the best. YouTube.
It's so bad.
I know. It's so bad, it's so good. The data is unreal. YouTube, in my opinion, probably the second best in the social networks, and then third is like the Google world. I guess you say Twitter probably does the best. Twitter and LinkedIn kind of even up there. But yeah, like when you come down to it, like what I'm able to glean from my world in social, you know, I'm limited to what the analytics tools that either they offer me natively as like Facebook Analytics, Twitter Analytics, LinkedIn Analytics, or what they selectively put out through an API. So, you know, for something like Snapchat, we are doing a ton with a lot of really big brands now who want to get on Snapchat, who want to get involved and produce content, whether they man their own channel or they work with like the network of all these influencers that we manage. It is a different story, but the idea is that like, if they're going to make an investment, they need to know what they're getting out of it. So it's my job to say, like, I know that there are 10 million people every day that are logging on and looking at certain things and elements of Snapchat. I know, like, I'm looking at data. It's not publicly exposed, right? Like, it's a competitive advantage that I have for being way too into Snapchat, probably. You know, so like, so there's other things, but we always try to do things to collect data. Like, I wrote a really big article that I basically dissected any possible metric that one could ever want to measure on Snapchat. 3/4 of those metrics I know don't exist in the API. The other one, well, okay. The other one, I'm gonna be late for my podcast. But the other ones, like you have all these things, they expose in the API. The other ones are like missing metrics, things that we know. Like I know that a video can be minimum of 1 second, maximum of 10 seconds. You know, those are all new data points that make a complete picture for a brand marketer. If I'm a brand marketer, I go to YouTube and I post all my commercials on YouTube because I know I have time viewed, I know I have completion rate, I know I have drop-off rate, I know I have maybe some click-throughs here or there, and then I have really great audience stuff, which Snapchat doesn't have yet, they will. So like, I know I have all those things, so that's why I post video probably on YouTube, and then there's a cool scale of people. But does that mean that it's the best place? I don't know. For us, we're seeing 4 to 5 times higher completion rates on very comparable videos. You know, we did a really cool campaign with JBL during the NBA All-Star game, and we had people watch, like think about Snapchat, right? Everybody's kind of familiar with Snapchat. We had people watch 1,000 hours of video in 3 days. That literally was all branded content, all about JBL, kids wearing the JBL headphones the whole time. It was good, it wasn't entertaining. I mean, it was entertaining, but like, it was 1,000 hours. And now if you went to Snapchat and if you were JBL, if they went and did that same experience, they would have zero idea. The problem is like sometimes we have to try harder as marketers, and I hate when people just like want to have everything served up to them on a silver platter. Sometimes you gotta just try a little bit harder. And it's good and bad, right? I think there's all these things. But yeah, like there's a level of things that you're never going to be able to get. I can go and I can set up Google Webmaster Tools, and I can start measuring affinity categories of people based on other sites that they're looking at. Like right now, Del Mondo, we operate mainly in like television, media, entertainment, and everybody, I can tell the top 10 things are audience behaviors when I look into like my affinity categories. It's shutterbugs, filmographers, all these like fun, kitschy categories to describe like people who like creating things. And that validates the content that I'm creating. Like, am I creating a community? Yeah, it's not the same as like probably 99% of the same forms that we talk about up here. But like me, by continually posting a constant message through my channels as Del Mondo, and gleaning what I can get. I get far more data about the people who are my clients as Del Mondo, are potential users or potential influencers, by owning my website instead of like measuring my Snapchat stats to go after new clients and things like that. So it's a give and take, but you have to never wait for it to get served to you on a silver platter. That's what I say.
Sarah, so what are some examples of your favorite communities, owned communities?
My favorite owned communities? There are some that I think have been, well, favorite in what way? Like what would,
that you think are doing like they have like very engaged communities, it serves the brand, but maybe they're also doing it in a way that they know it's not about their brand, but just like an effective.
One initiative that I really admire, they have had some successes and some struggles, is Amex's Open Forum. Open Forum is a community platform for small business owners, and membership is something that's been part of Amex's business model since the 1980s. So this was just one expression of how they're trying to make the world better for small business owners. And I think one thing they've done very well is providing educational content for small business owners, anything related from legal to finance to hiring, setting up your team, marketing an early stage of products. They definitely have had their challenges though. I would say mostly on the product side.
Who was that?
I'm sorry?
Who was that?
Amex Open Forum.
What kind of challenges do they have?
I think they've had some engagement challenges, mostly not because they didn't have the audience, but because their product was built entirely in WordPress, which is probably not a great platform for you to build a community platform from scratch, which it definitely hindered their product development.
So Jen, what resources do you think you would need to really successfully pull off an owned community?
Resources for an owned community. If it's, we'll say it's already set up and running, right? Or do you mean build it?
I mean, let's say you want to start a community. What needs to go into that?
To start a community, I mean, first off, a strategy will help you figure out where you want to go. That is first and foremost, and usually the first thing to be forgotten. I would say figure out the design. What do you want it to look like? What the user experience would be? Like that kind of stuff would all go in your strategy. Where it's hosted, like what platform, what company you're using, are you building it, are you buying it, all that kind of stuff. Fast forward, and once you've put it up and it's out there and we'll say successful, you then need to have a team of people managing it. So for example, the TV the network that I manage right now, both owned properties and unowned, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff. We have 40 people a week managing this stuff. So they're not all full time, but 40 people are managing probably, I don't know, we'll say 300 hours a week worth of work. So we're obviously an agency and the company wants to do that. So just resources, people-wise, is a big thing to think about when you're managing a community. And someone to own it, someone has to own it. You can't just give it to a department and just have it be a side project.
That emphasizes the importance of design. I'm very quiet because I work with a lot of different types of communities, not brand communities. I work with communities that are internal to companies. So they have very different challenges. I'm learning a ton if you're listening to all me talk. But this stuff we think about a lot, and I can't emphasize how important design and usability is of all these platforms. I did a lot of research about owned communities because I honestly didn't know what that meant before I was invited to this panel. So I came across a lot of them. The Figment one, Procter & Gamble runs one called Being Girl. It's about teenage girls talking about growing up and things that come along with it, dating and acne and becoming a woman. And then Procter & Gamble sells all their products through, and they do a great job with that. But all of these platforms, they are lacking design and functionality. Like, it's crazy. I'm embarrassed that they exist. And I know that's really harsh, but if you want your community to be engaged and active, they need to enjoy using the product, And if it feels like clunky or outdated or something doesn't work the first time they try to go and do it, they're never going to come back.
Yeah.
It's so crucial. And then also just making sure that there is that person that is giving that point of view, especially in that early stage. If you just think that you have this beautiful product and you got the right invitations out, if there's not that direction in the beginning, it's really going to be a challenge to get that, to take off.
User onboarding is incredibly important for new platforms.
We spend like weeks populating these communities with content and with influencers and really exciting stuff, so that when you as an employee get there for your first time, you see, oh cool, the CEO actually just left a really cool like video message here, or oh wow, there's a great industry report that I've been looking for, or there's already like Q&As going on across the company that I finally know how to do a pivot table on Excel. Like all this stuff is really valuable, but if you get there and it's an empty shell of a community, like you're never gonna come back.
Seeding a new community is key. You cannot just open it up and have it be a ghost town and no one's going to want to start
There's a stat out there that if your first post isn't responded to in 15 minutes, you're 47% likely to never do a second post.
We totally recommend it every time that we run a big, I ran the Egyptian Revolution live blog with the Daily Beast and helped them set that up. And if you don't start posting comments right away, or have somebody else, you should totally have a good plan for that. It's not shady, it's true. It's like scientific studies have been shown that it's like the first man in, and it's very hard to be the first man into any conversation. Sorry. Oh, that's really good. That was like, what time is it? Not bad. But yeah, there's a whole scientific theory, and I don't have time to talk about it all, being the first man in and do a conversation, and so that's something that's super important. You got to seed that stuff. You can't just expect it to do that. And you touched on another super important thing that I think that we kind of missed is access and exclusivity as well. That whole click and get. I just launched a podcast. One of the tips that I've been doing some digging in communities that are all based around podcasting. One of the big shiny pieces that I learned from that was don't post one episode to start. You post 5. Because when somebody sees one and they really like it, they have something to go for the next time. And like you just said, if you come into a new community and you've never been in there before, and the CEO is welcoming you with a message, wow, that means something. That access and exclusivity is super important to make that a little bit more valuable right from that get-go.
I mean, it also legitimizes it too, because it's like your CEO is telling you, I'm buying into this, let's all take part, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and actually participate.
Community is a full company thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Whether it's owned or not.
That's a whole other panel. It's
Yeah.
executive buy-in on the community. But yeah, it's super important.
Selling it into the C-suite.
Yeah, you can talk all about that.
Yeah.
For own communities, you're speeding the onboarding process, but say for email marketing, that's a lot of times things are getting really outdated, the free email or things like that. What do you guys recommend for getting, building your list that's not outdated? What do you think really works?
Building what kind? Sorry.
Like an email list.
Okay.
Content.
Yeah.
Just content.
Good content.
So no free offerings, so they exchange the email. A lot of people say you have to have a value proposition to once, right? But is there any specific things like video series, email series, or
isn't that also just all good content?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's definitely about content. I run a newsletter called Community Is.
It's a great newsletter.
You should all sign up. And it's just about good content and creating something that people want to pass along within their teams and to their friends.
And the cool thing, email is a known community too.
Mm-hmm.
And most people forget, that's a known community too. You can find, MailChimp, very easy to segment your list and find the top 10 people who open and take the most action. And then I'm going right to them and I'm giving them something different. And then I'm going to put them into a new bucket. And then I'm going to start doing more stuff to them. And I think that's passing of the people across your hands sometimes is kind of a game in email oftentimes, and finding, not to get too tribe-y and buzzwords and stuff like that. If you find some of those most engaged users, bring them into a whole, you found them out of the slew of all of these other people. People really try, there's been millions of dollars sunk into, tens of millions of dollars sunk into software companies that try to do this with Facebook too. Mine out your top most engaged fans and then figure out some type of way. Any social advocacy tool that is on the market today is really just really in-depth Facebook insights, and hope to God they click and come into my system so I can then get their email and tie those two pieces together. And that's like this whole social CRM angle, which is the missing link between your social audience and your owned audience, which is like, if somebody really does that well, they're just going to make bajillions of dollars.
What you're talking about is like ambassadors or super users,
yeah.
right? So basically, when you have a large community or an active community, you ultimately want to find some of your top users for better purposes, and so usually give them access to things. This actually works better, I think, in an owned community more so than unowned, but it can be done on both. But basically, you just want to find those people in some way, shape, or form, and then you want to use them in certain ways. Give them a lot of benefits, access to stuff, opportunities, events, money, whatever. But you're basically using them for more data and better insights and feedback.
And to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And they're usually really excited to do it too.
What's the name of your newsletter again?
Community is. The URL is just community.is. Another question over.
I want to ask a question about the brand owner's community and liability. So about the point of, did you say Cooper or? So I'm working for a luxury automotive brand, and I realize they have great forum going on, but it's third party. It's not regulated by the brand itself. We have an idea of like, what about bringing that into our platform so we can have that inside the platform? And then my client was like going crazy, like, no, like it's too dangerous. If somebody shared this information about your car and the car blew up, they're going to sue it, blah blah blah. Is there any like good examples of how to deal with that, or just then go?
Sui, is your question about just how to integrate legal into your community?
Or like if you're going to bring those in, so example of the Mini Cooper, is that owned by the brand, and what type of content are they sharing, and is it how are they dealing with liability?
Okay, I get it. So in the case of Mini Cooper, that was 100% done by Mini Cooper. And I would say almost everything done by, especially a major brand, startups are a little sketchier, but with a major brand, you have to go through legal for all of this stuff. And there absolutely is liability. And there's a great company called Comply, which actually does social media regulations. And, good. It's just like CMPLY. It's like .ly or something. But yeah, they're pretty good to go to with questions about this kind of stuff for regulation on social media, at least. I would say that there's not a day that goes by that I don't talk to our legal team like multiple times a day. And it's in my case, it's like for users and their self-aware, like the self-harm stuff I talk about, it has to go through somebody else that we can perform wellness checks and make sure that the person is alive on the other side, right? And so I've dealt with FBI like bomb threats on our site. There was a terrorism issue last year. Like crazy stuff happens all the time, and you have to go through legal to go through the proper channels and report the stuff to where it's got to go.
So I'm not in the community industry, I'm pure UX. So if you're gonna do through that content, like do you have the people post something and they go through the security check and then okay, this is good material?
If it's an owned community, they post and we find it, then we have to go through our internal escalation process and that kind of stuff. If it's on a social network, actually they'll make it pretty easy, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at least. I don't know about Instagram, but they have internal structures in place that they do send it off, like, and they usually will deal with the person or the user or whatever for a variety of things. Yeah, legal's a big thing. Don't do stuff without them because you'll get in trouble.
Yeah, anytime you're dealing with user-generated content, there needs to be a moderation process.
Oh, moderation, absolutely. I can't tell you how many like naked photos we get from people for various.
You can imagine the types of videos.
Yeah, I can only you.
Someone told a story yesterday of it's like an education platform called Socratic, and it's like someone late at night went on their site and started uploading pornographic GIFs into their. Oh yeah, it was Pornhub.
Or at least they
claimed to be Pornhub. Yeah, they claimed to be Pornhub on their site. And this was like late at night, and apparently the super users on their site went through with their moderation tools, which they've been given access to, just from removing everything on their own. So.
We had a pretty bad case. I'm not going to talk about it, Jordan. If you ever watched this video, you know what I'm talking about, buddy. There was a really, really bad situation when with a client that was using a third-party software like Livefire to build an owned community that widely and beyond, while it did not violate our terms of service to use our software, damn if it violated like terms of service for being a human being, because it was not very good, and we had really bad legal people come involved and get involved with it, and it had to like get shut down. And there was a lot of things because you're using software as a proxy to participate now in this community, or if you're using a third-party tool. Not every third-party, some people here are like more web coding knowledgeable than others. Some people are more on the marketing side. Like what you see on the site is like not just what you get. You know what I mean? Everything isn't just like a pre-made box and it's just like lives on its own, right? You have all these different components of that. So just because you build something or just because you even buy something doesn't mean that like it's a safe space. You know what I mean? It's not like a whole walled garden that you can't get into. It's one piece of a lot of different elements, and so everybody can make this part of their own. And so this was, like you said before, like we had some crazy stuff getting uploaded through our tool. Then that goes into that question: where does the community rights go? Is it by using a tool? Is it by participating in this environment? Where do those kind of like regulations?
You bring up a good point that when you own a community, you usually can post-moderate stuff, so people have to submit things before it gets put up on the website because you control that, and there's house rules or guidelines or something that people have to follow. On social networks, you have to pre-moderate. So, I'm sorry, reverse that. Yeah, I was like, wait a second, it's been a long day. Reverse that. So when you post-moderate something, you have to look at it after the fact, after it's been put up. When you pre-moderate something, you look at it before it goes up on your site. So Facebook is something that you can't do anything about until after it's been put up, and then you can hide it, but then that person still thinks it's on the page, and their friends see it too. So you can't really delete things all the time, yeah. But yeah, so when you own stuff, it's harder to ban someone or hide their content if you have to. It can be done, but it's just not easy.
I have a simple, small technical, because you know, like web development, front and back end. What are your opinions on WordPress versus Squarespace? There's a lot of hype.
Fuck Squarespace.
I
hate Squarespace.
I think the front end of Squarespace is beautiful, but their back end is harder to manage.
Any of the stuff where you're kind of dragging stuff around isn't very good for SEO. Like you want to build your website, you want to use WordPress because then you can just do a lot more with the data behind it, right? So Google likes it more. That being said, I actually host my own personal website on flavors.me because I don't care. So
I didn't know that was still even like.
Yeah, apparently.
I love flavors. Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean,
a lot of companies.
I don't know why MX decided to build on WordPress. They do have a lot of content, so from that perspective, it's great. But as a community platform, it's not great.
I can answer that question.
Yeah.
Oh, answer please.
Yeah, please
So
answer.
I worked at Open on Open Forum, and it was, when it was first conceived, it was only as a blogging platform where they thought that they were going to get their experts like Guy, and they were just going to put it out there, and that was all they were going to do. So they never conceived it as being a community where people could come together, and it clearly evolved from that over time and became much more beneficial to them. They meant to do it.
They add forum in messaging after that. Like
was
it was like
hard,
MX
yeah.
Open, and then it was
Anything
MX
on
Open
MX
Forum.
is hard to rebuild.
Yeah.
So.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure if they could do it all over again, they might have done it differently.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
If you're building a community, go to the community enterprise companies. Jive is a great first place to go to. Lithium, Higher Logic. I don't know. If you just Google like enterprise platforms, those are way better places than blogging platforms.
Yeah, that's a good point. Fundamentally, that's like, and that's a good point of what you said. Like Amex definitely started as a publishing platform as opposed to a community platform. So I'm pretty sure like they switched their messaging halfway through. It was like MX Open, then it was Forum. They tacked it on at the end of it.
They kept hiring new people to take over the strategy, but they never did a strategy, and they kept adding things to it. So to go back to that strategy, the most important thing that people forget, Amex is probably one of the better examples of that.
Yeah.
That goes back to the ownership, right? Like the sandbox theory, right? Like you can build your sandbox out of whatever materials that you want, as long as it satisfies your needs. And your needs may be perfect, and you may want to bring everybody in your street may want to come over because you have built the coolest sandbox, but you're going to think that you built the coolest thing, and not a single person wants to use it too. So that's like kind of pros and cons to those.
If you build it, they don't always come.
That's right.
That's for sure.
Somebody,
I just want to do a quick time check and see how we're doing.
We're at 8:30,
Yeah.
so we should kind of
Probably wrap it up.
Okay. Really engaging.
How about everyone says one line to wrap it up? So.
Leave us with your last, food for thought.
What are your last questions, maybe, before?
Yeah, let's have one.
So if you're building a brand, say for example like a fitness program or like you're providing a service and you didn't anticipate like all of these followers, say on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I guess at what point do you decide that you need to start building a community now? Because you have all these followers who are interested in your service, but now you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, and there's this huge need. So at what point do you decide to create a community, and how do you even go about solving that problem?
Well, you can have a community on social. I don't want to discount that. Like, that can exist. I think you'd want to do it at the point when it actually makes sense for your business. So if you don't have the resources to do it, don't do it.
Yeah, I would sort of say like that is the, look at like the law of diminishing returns, right? So at what point does your activities in the social space continue to grow and continue to provide you revenue, and at that point that it stops, that you've invested such resources, it's math, you can figure that out. Like, at what point do I invest X amount of hours and how much money do I get out of it? Try to do that differently. I would argue if you have a service like a fitness group or anything, you would ideally, yeah, you'll do stuff in social, but you should want to like move them over, right? Because you want to upsell them, you want them to stay involved, you want them to like sign up for a new class, right? That's the toughest part. It's very tough. And I spoke at an event last month in Jacksonville about crowdfunding. And one of the big questions that we had was like, how do you, everybody's got a cool idea, but really the best crowdfunded campaigns are the ones that actually build a community through the process. And by the time they're ready, they have that deliverable thing for them. You can't just like reach out to every one of those people like we've talked about today and know that Nick has liked every single one of your Facebook posts, and I go to your website 18 times a day from all of these different links that you've done just from social, to then say, hey Nick, I'm really doing this really special thing, or I know this, like, hey, people like you have the same thing. So the ownership is like porting them over. So I'd say like, if you're starting to do more social and it's not providing you more revenue from whatever you're selling or whatever objective, whatever metric you're saying is successful, KPI actually, stop, right? Like once you hit that diminishing return, try something else. And then once you hit that again, try something else and try something else, and then compare those 5 things and figure out where that like sweet spot lies. So you gotta like try everything.
I would also say like, don't try and build this is the whole community platform we need. I think you can start small and just test it out and see what works, and kind of, again, seed it with the really, really engaged people who probably want to know each other already, and build off of that, rather than put all of your resources and energy and time and like dump all that into something that you don't even know yet if it's going to be successful.
Right. Like you could start out by doing something manually, like creating an ambassador program that you run like via email. Low cost.
Yeah. Get them out of social and into your space. That's like, if you take one thing about like, that is the title of this whole thing, I know, but like, it sounds like, it's seriously, take them off of social, put them into your space. Then you can do whatever you want with them. Keep doing what you want in social, but like, you're gonna find different balances, you're gonna find different elements, and you're gonna be able to, once you have them in at the most base level, that whole lean idea, once you have their email, you can always invite them 3 months later when you've actually like built something. You know what I mean? Getting their email in, think about it. Like you said before, how are you even going to know that that community tool, system, structure that you're building is even right? If you get people off of social and into, even if you just got 15 people out of 5,000, you get 15 people who have said, I want to talk to you a little bit more. Maybe you reach out to them to help build this product, use them for research. And I think that those are like those building blocks that you can take to say, okay, I'm not ready to launch a Jive community or to launch like a huge thing. But like I can start a very small email address that just says, hi, how's it going? Here's my latest blog post this week.
Start small, think big.
Yeah.
Love it. That's a great note to end on. Thank you everyone for